In this video, I'm going to talk about the case of Willie Pickton, a serial killer pig farmer who was convicted of murdering dozens of women.
This is one story that you're not going to want to miss. Willie Pickton was a serial killer pig farmer who was convicted of murdering dozens of women. What's even more horrifying is that he would butcher and eat some of his victims. This is a truly chilling case that will send chills down your spine. Stay tuned for all the details. Robert William Pickton, called Willie, was born in Port Coquitlam, Le Mans, October 24 of 1949 to Louise and Leonard Pickton, poor farmers raised in rural Canada. His older sister, Linda, was a year older than him, and his brother Dave followed him by 1 year. Willie's life was difficult from the onset. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, which may have caused some sort of brain damage. The Picktons were not a wealthy family, and the children were forced to work, as many of the other families did in rural areas. The difference was that the Picktons lived in filth and chaos by choice and loved it. Families' farm animals came into the house as they pleased, breaking things, leaving dirt, manure, and their stench. Because of their smell, the children were often made fun of in school and recalled their youth with bad memories. While Louise wanted her daughter to have nice things, but felt her sons did not deserve it. While Linda went to birthday parties and Sunday school, the brothers were often left isolated on the farm, with little interest in outside socialization. We can only guess due to the way others treated them. Neighborhood kids thought the Pickton brothers were weird, not only for their smell but also because they had speech impediments. Willie never talked much at all, but when he did, his voice was described as high and fast, stumbling over his words. Though Willie was never seen as intelligent, and his test scores ranked him very low. By grade 3 he was placed in a slow kids class to accommodate slower students. Some of Willie's childhood stories stand out and show signs of trouble to come. One was that when he was just 3 years old, he drove a truck full of young pigs into a tree, loosing the pigs and wrecking the truck. He allegedly received a beating for it, but about this he said, "But that's what happens." Another was that when he was 12, he bought a calf with money he saved himself. One day after school, he could not find the calf and asked his father where it was. His father suggested Willie look in the barn, where he saw his calf slaughtered, hanging from the rafters. About this Willie said, "That really upset me, but that happens. That's life. I mean, we're only here for so long. When your time is over, your time is over." Willie used these stories as justifications for his crimes. His mentality was that not every creature deserves life, but that every living thing faces both punishment and tribulation purely by being alive. Pickton's adult life. At the tail end of the 1970s, both Leonard and Louise died of cancer in short succession. As a final act of insult, Louise's will contained a clause that made Linda and Dave the trustees in Willie's large sum of inheritance, which he would not receive until he was 40. In another 12 years. This struck a blow and left Willie angry and jaded. As the boys took control of the family businesses, things at the farm got a bit seedier. Dave got involved with the Hells Angels, people he saw as his personal heroes. The farm became a place littered with criminal activity and was being watched by Vancouver police. The Angels often used the land for their drug running and chop shop activities. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, was on the chop shop trail, but they did not think Willie was capable of being involved. They saw him as too dim-witted, though he was actually the one calling the shots, not Dave. As far as the RCMP was concerned, what was happening at the farm was regularly thievery, not worthy of a deeper investigation, especially when they were also hunting a child serial killer at the time. Within 4 years, Pickton began racking up victims. The hunting ground. Willie killed women whom he picked up from the Lower East Side of Vancouver, a seedy skid row of apartments and single-room occupancy, SRO, motels filled with drug-addled sex workers. In the 1970s and 80s, Vancouver's police department and mayor were well aware that Women were frequently going missing from this part of town, but politicians pushed the sex workers out of safer residential and tourist areas and kept them corralled in the far more dangerous streets of the Lower East Side. In the late 1980s, Mayor Gordon Campbell proclaimed that it was unfortunate these women were being attacked and killed, but that citizens wanted them off the streets. When Willie began his hunting, he was working within a well-established system of neglect. VPD was not interested in investigating the deaths of poor Native women. By the early 1990s, when it was clear that the VPD was unwilling to do further work on the case and the number of missing women was mounting, the RCMP took over and created a special project called Project Eclipse to create a criminal profile of the serial killer. However, their presentation fell flat. It was 1991, and many investigation teams were still using methods of knocking on doors, matching fingerprints, and talking to witnesses. Ideas of geographical criminal profiling, which were cutting edge at the time, were simply not accepted as viable methods of investigation. Additionally, the VPD was still adamantly against the idea that they were faced with a serial killer. In the meantime, Pickton continued hunting, uninhibited by law enforcement. The final 3 years. It was not until 1995 that public perception of a serial killer loose in the Vancouver area came to public awareness. More and more frequently, women were found raped, murdered, beaten and dumped in the mountainous surroundings of Vancouver, and Willie Pickton was a person of interest. The police knew Willie, they knew about the farm and the Piggy Good Time Society, club of Hell's Angels that met there, because police frequented their parties. Even the Port Coquitlam mayor was once in attendance. Even still, women were coming up missing from the downtown east side. Finally, in 1998, when the VPD would still not admit that they were tracking a serial killer, they announced a project to investigate over 40 missing women from between 1971 and 1998. Around this time, Willie's own people began turning on him, because Willie had not necessarily been quiet or subtle over the years. A man named Scott Chubb, a close friend of the Picktons, told Dave that they needed to get Willie off the streets to stop the killing. He had noticed, as many others had, the mounting pile of purses, jewelry, and women's clothes that was in Willie's trailer. He said, "Plainly, you can't live on the property, and not know. Not with all the women coming in, and not leaving." Still, Dave did nothing. He was probably a little scared of Willie himself. Willie had become nothing short of unhinged. He was becoming sloppier and less methodical. Lynn Ellingson, a woman who did odd jobs around the farm in exchange for drugs, said that Willie forced her to see his slaughterhouse, where he butchered women and pigs alike. She saw a dead woman hanging from the rafters, and Willie told her, "It's okay. She's just like a pig anyways." She gave this information to the police in 1999, but it would be another 2 years before an arrest was made. The arrest and property search. In the end, it was Scott Chubb who sold Willie down the river, not for morality, but for tip money over some illegal weapon ownership. This allowed the RCMP to secure a search warrant for the Pickton property, as no DNA evidence had been found to tie him to any disappearance. Finally, on February 5, 2002, Robert William Pickton was arrested and taken in for questioning. Over the next 10 months, an army of forensic scientists would comb his property, obtaining hundreds of thousands of pieces of biological evidence in the form of severed body parts, teeth, bones, and viscera stored in barrels along with pig intestines. Initially, he was charged with the murders of 2 women, but those charges began to mount as police investigated further. Over 50 women were missing from the downtown east side since 1983 to 1995, and 39 of them were from the years of 1995 to 2002, Willie's most active years. By November of 2002, the remains of 18 women had been found on his property. Forensic analysts compared the size and scope of the crime scene investigations to that of the site of the September 11, 2001 attack in terms of the grisly work. Body parts were found stored in the massive meat freezers along with the pig meat that he sold to the public. After his interview, or rather his 11-hour interrogation, Willie was described as nonplussed, detached, and soft-spoken. He first vehemently denied the allegations. The trial. Robert William Pickton's trial began in 2007 and lasted 10 months, calling over 200 witnesses and costing the Crown millions. He was charged for the second-degree murders of 6 women, and he did not testify at his trial. In Canada, the charges for second and first-degree murder carry the same life sentence, though second-degree leaves a judge more lenient to the possibility of parole. Although representatives from the VPD have apologized to the families who still grieve their missing loved ones, many are still angry and call the entire investigation a colossal failure, full of systematic bias, which resulted in forsaking dozens of Native women. Robert William Pickton is deceased.